Hello there, fellow woodturners. Welcome to Soddy Daisy. Soddy Daisy is about 20 miles north of Chattanooga, and that's where my wood turning studio is. And I intentionally use the word studio. Mechanics and technicians have shops. Wood turners actually have studios because wood turners very quickly become artistic and very quickly become very creative in the stuff that they do, and I attribute those characteristics to artists. So what we're going to do today is look at how to make Christmas ornaments. Let me tell you a little bit of history about myself. My name is Charles Jennings. I reside in Soddy Daisy, as I mentioned, and I've been wood turning for about 15 years, and I got sucked into this vortex of wood turning in a very unusual way, and I won't go into the details. But nonetheless, I have had an absolute blast wood turning. I have been totally impressed with the wood turning community, and there are three characteristics that I can identify with the wood turning community that I don't find in many other organizations. And the first is their honesty. They are absolutely truthful. They tell you something, you can take it to the bank. The second characteristic that I find with wood turners is that there is a tremendous free flow of information, totally unencumbered. And that is from the most accomplished wood turner to the beginner. There are no secrets in wood turning. Everybody shares everything that they do. And the final characteristic is what leads us to the presentation today, and that is their giving spirit, both to each other and to the community in general. And it's that giving spirit that brings me to today's topics, and that is giving to the community. And Tristatewoodturners is a official chapter of the American Association of Woodturners, and in conjunction with that, we are involved in three outreach efforts. The first is Pens for the Troops. Pens for the Troops is a cooperative effort between Woodcraft of America and the AAW chapters in providing a pen, a writing utensil, for all servicemen and women that are overseas at Christmas time. And we make these. Woodcraft provides the kit, and we provide the wood and the skill to make them and color them. And we provide these nationally by the thousands to the Department of Defense, and they're distributed to servicemen and women overseas. The next effort that we're involved in is called Beads of Courage. And Beads of Courage is a simple bowl that we make, has a Beads of Courage logo on the top, and these go to children that are severely ill that have many procedures, and for every procedure they receive a small bead, and they string them up and they store them in these boxes. And so we make these, our club alone, we made almost 130 of these last year. I have got three others sitting back here that I've done, but these will go for the Beads of Courage. Our third effort that we involved in is we make Christmas ornaments, and we make many kinds of Christmas ornaments, and these are what I make. These are little Christmas trees. And at our bank, which is First Bank, we have three branches that allow us to put a Christmas tree in the store, in the bank, and they sell them, collect the money, and all of the proceeds, 100% of the proceeds, all goes to Chattanooga Food Bank. So we make Christmas trees. We also make little colored ornaments. This is a John Lucas type one. This is another one that we make. This is a Banksia pod, and a Banksia pod is a seed pod. This is a Banksia pod. This is a seed pod from a specific type of palm tree that we cut up, and we make it into, I cut it into sections, put it on a holder, and then we turn that central part of the Banksia pod and make a globe out of it. And they look kind of different and are quite novel. The final thing that I do is that I make miniature birdhouses with cardinals on them. And they have proven to be extremely popular. I've got 20 of them made for this year already, and I'm still working on them. And let's talk very briefly about my evolution of the miniature birdhouse. This is one of the early ones that I made that has a little miniature bird on it, and people love those. But when I happened to see the cardinals, and these came from Michael's, I was in Michael's one day and saw these and said, I wonder how those would look on the birdhouse. So I took one of the birdhouses that I have that has the little bird on it and replaced it with a big bird. It just didn't look right. The birdhouse was not quite big enough to really get the full effect of the cardinal sitting on the birdhouse, so I scaled up my birdhouses a little bit, and you can see a slight difference in scale, and then I put the cardinal birdhouse on them. And this is what we'll make today. We'll make one like this. I don't make any two alike because I let the wood, in essence, tell me, or the scrap of wood, tell me what is the next step to do. If you're looking for a formal treatise on miniature birdhouses, this is the gospel. This is Dick Singh's book on turning miniature birdhouses. It is outstanding. Quite frankly, I was making the birdhouses before I ever found this book, and I was very surprised that the techniques that I ended up using are very, very similar to things that Dick Singh suggests. He does the smaller type of birdhouse, not the bigger ones for the cardinals. But nonetheless, if you're looking for a treatise, this is the place to go. You can also go online to YouTube. I've looked at YouTube, and they have about 400 sites for making Christmas ornaments. Many of them are birdhouses, but they're everything under the sun. They're angels, Christmas trees, there's snowmen, there's all types of balls, inside out turning. It's just a wide gamut of stuff available on the YouTube that's available for making Christmas ornaments. So let's talk about Christmas ornaments. When you go in the shop, what's the first thing you do? We're in a safety conscious mode today with the COVID-19. So when you go in the shop, the first thing you do is put your safety glasses on, at the least, at the very minimum. And so these are my normal wear safety glasses. I have extra ones. These are some that my grandsons wear. They both have their own pair. I've got a bunch that have side shields on them that I can use if I'm doing something that's unusually flaky or pieces are flying off. But by all means, put on safety glasses at the very least. Now let me move these out of the way. The miniature birdhouse has 4 parts. It has the bottom and the top and a little perch and then a bird. And we're going to make those in that order. We'll make the bottom first, then we'll make a top, we'll make a perch, and then we'll put it together. So if you are like 99.9% of all of the woodturners, somewhere in your shop, your garage, your studio, or whatever, you have one or more boxes of cutoffs. And all of my birdhouses are made 100% from scrap, from leftovers, from cutoffs. And sometimes I stack them up like this. This is a piece of cherry, another piece of cherry. This is a piece of hickory. A piece of cedar and another piece of cherry. These are all hidden in there, bases and possibly roofs for the birdhouse. So when we go to make a birdhouse, we just basically look at something. I choose something that has nice grain in it, nice characteristics. That's a piece of Floridian rosewood. We'll take a square piece and then we'll make it round and then we'll put a tenon on it and then we'll drill some holes in it. So there are no real limitations on the size of the birdhouse. You can make them very small. Some people make tiny little ones. You can make them very large. But you basically start with a block of wood. And I would recommend a piece that's about 2 by 2, maybe 3, 4, or 5 inches long. And even though it's longer than the base, you can do a lot of creative things with the bottom. This one was a little longer, so it had a nice little icicle stuck on the bottom. You can make them so that they're perfectly smooth on the bottom. There's no icicle on the bottom at all. And you can make them very fancy with burn lines and stuff, all types of things. It's all your discretion on what you want to do. And I will typically try to make the icicle on the bottom an integral part of the bottom if I have enough wood. If I don't, I can drill a hole in it and make an icicle and glue it in the bottom. So let's go ahead and look at and we're going to do this one in a minute. This is just a piece of spalted maple. It's about 3 inches long. 3 1/4, pardon me, 3 1/4 inches long. But I do them a little bit different than a lot of other people. I will turn them round and then I drill a hole in them. That is a 3/4 inch hole that is 2 inches deep. And at the bottom of that hole, I drill a second hole that is a 5/8 inches diameter and about a 1/2 inch deep. So that when they get ready to turn, they slide on the mandrel. This one I've actually added a little tape to, it's kind of gotten worn down. What happens is the 5/8 piece here goes into the 5/8 piece on the bottom. And with that hole and that hole in line, it keeps it in line because we're going to hollow out the inside, and we could not keep it true if we didn't have a way to hold the bottom piece. So one of the things that you'll need to make that you should have, and I have a bunch of them here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but they're all just simple little mandrels, little holders, if you want to think of them in that regard, as a holder. And I'm not going to bore you by drilling holes, to watch you drill holes. Nobody likes me to watch anybody drill holes. So, but what I do is I don't ever make one. I make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I got 12 of them here that I've made. You lose so much time getting set up that you make one and then you have to go do something. I make multiple times all at the front end. It makes it a much more efficient operation, and I'll show you with the tops. I do exactly the same thing. I make a whole bunch of them and just put them in here because they're all of them are going to fit, because they all use the same little holder and they're all drilled the same distance. So you can use them, and it makes it much more efficient. If you're going to make one, fine. If you're going to make two, you don't have to do it that way. But if you're going to make multiple ones, like to support the Christmas tree effort, you need to come up with a little mandrel. And this is that's a piece of cherry that I cut. It's a good practice to make a mandrel, because what you're doing is you're making a 3/4 inch and a 5/8 inch shaft on the end of a piece of cherry that fits right in this. And so that's what we're going to do. So let's go ahead. Okay, now let's look at specifically how we make the bottom. And this is a piece of spalted maple that I've already drilled the holes in. This is a 3/8 inch opening. This is where the bird goes in and out. Originally it had a hole directly underneath it, and what I have done is I have actually moved that hole on my latest ones to the side so that you can more clearly see the cardinal. The first thing we'll do is clean up the end. I use a Vicmark. This is a Vicmark 100. It has dovetail jaws, so I get a good hold. I also will use a wooden holder for the bottom, just for that extra security. The most secure way you can turn on the lathe is between centers, and I try to make every attempt to turn between centers if I possibly can. What I'll do now is that I'm just going to clean up the end of that so that it's perfectly true. I have a dual purpose parting tool that I use. I don't know whether you can see it, but it actually has an angled end. I cut it on an angle so that when I cut it, it actually makes a at the same time it's parting, it's also cutting the angle for my jaws on my chuck. So that's a nice handy way to do it. And I'll just pull it up across here. Okay, so it's true on the end. We're going to reverse it. But before we reverse it, what we're going to do is we're going to hollow it out some, because we really want to make these true Christmas ornaments, not Christmas weights. So we try to keep them as light as possible, and I hollow both the inside of this and the inside of the top, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And I use a tool that the late Joe Geddes showed us how to make in one of his demos here. Oh, there it is. And they're basically a piece of 1/4 inch cold roll steel that we silver solder a cutting bit on the end of them. And so you can see, you can reach at different levels in there. And this is the old standard one that I use all the time. And I've worn it down to where I'm about within 1/4 inch of using it up. So it's going to have another bit silver soldered on the end of it. What we'll do is we'll leave this 3/4 inch opening at the top intact. We're not going to do anything to that. And we're going to start inside about 1/2 inch. hollow, the key thing you don't want to do is to go below the 2 inches, so you destroy the 5/8 inch hole that you're going to use for a guide in there. And that looks acceptable. What we'll do now is we're going to reverse this and put it on our little holder, our little mandrel. We'll bring this up to hold it in place. And then we'll go about shaping. Now, shaping is an option to your discretion, the turner's discretion. How does he want to make it? There are a lot of options available to you. I make them so that they're a little smaller at the top and at the bottom. One of the first things I'll do is I'll true them up. And you can true them up with whatever you want. I'll just use a spindle roughing gouge. Where did my ruler go? What we'll do, remember we're at about 2.5 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here 2.5 inches. And all this does, it lets me know where the bottom of the 1/2 inch hole is, because I don't want to make it so small there that I'll cut into that. I typically use a 1/4 inch bowl gouge to do most of the shaping. I try to make it descend above the hole and below the hole. I typically will let it go the other way. A little smaller. You can use your tool of choice, whether it be a bowl gouge, a spindle gouge, a skew. Okay. That looks good. I can see the wall thickness up here. It looks like about maybe 1/8 to 3/16, which is what we want. I don't think you can see in the hole. But now what we'll do is we'll create something on the bottom, and I'm going to try to utilize that extra material that we had. If we had a lot of material on a big one, we could make a big fancy icicle on the bottom. That one doesn't look like one that'll do that way, but we'll make something there. Try to make the diameter, I'm trying to make a ring around the bottom as kind of a step between the finial and the body itself. And then from that, I just go in and put some kind of either a ball or something on the bottom. I need to leave a little bit of extra on the bottom so when I cut it off, the pin from the bottom of my live center doesn't protrude. You can't see it in there. Let's make that a little smaller. That seems to be a little bit big. Just round over this little thing a little bit so it looks like a bead. And let's get a spindle gouge here and make this a little bit smaller in there. Like I said, there are no designs of what you have to do and how to do it. It's all just left up to the individual's creativity. Okay. All right, now I sand. When I sand, I use my vacuum system, which is right there, but I'm not going to turn it on right now. You couldn't hear anything in here. The vacuum system is behind me. What we'll do is I sand. I start with 180. I sand 180, 240, 320, and maybe hit it with 400 or not. So let's do that. Okay, now that we're finished sanding, and I had the video turned off while sanding because my dust collector is right behind me. And when I'm in the shop by myself, I actually wear earmuffs to deafen that noise. It should have been outside, but this whole shop area, my studio, was an afterthought, to be very honest. What I like to do is I like to highlight some areas in here, and I make burn lines. And I use what is called a point tool. Some people call it a 3-point tool, but that's an incorrect name. It's actually a 3-faceted point tool. And all I do was come in here and cut a little line, cut one there, Another one there. Another one there. Then I come back with a small burn wire. And to my eye, that just makes it much more distinct. So I take the 300, 320 and just kind of go over those areas because sometimes it bleeds over to the side. Okay. Now we're ready to turn that off, but before we do that, I'm going to put some sanding sealer. Oh. And I use Zinsser wax-free shellac, cut about 25% with denatured alcohol, is my standard sanding sealer. It's a Jimmy Clues special. Jimmy Clues taught us how to use that, and it really seems to do a great job. You can use, there are all kind of brands of sanding sealer, but that one just works. I don't flash it off with my cigarette lighter like Jimmy Clues does, but nonetheless, it is a very, very good sealer. And I do wear gloves. It seems like I have a whole bunch of these around these days. For the grocery store and the drug store and whatever. And I take a standard shop towel roll and cut it into pieces. And it seems to work very, very well for this. I think it makes the highlighting caused by the spalting to really pop out. And you can see, I think that looks pretty good myself, but we'll have to clean the paper towel off there. These work awful good. Now after that's dried just a minute, and we'll speed it up by adding a little bit of pressure. A little friction makes it warm up and it drives off the denatured alcohol, which is the solvent for shellac. Okay, now you can use a lot of different finishes. You can use polyurethane, you can use lacquer, you can put additional coat, you could put Watco mineral oil, it's unlimited. I do a little different combination. I actually use friction polish, and then after it's completely finished and before I add the bird, I come back and overspray it with lacquer. Lacquer does not is not interfered with at all by the use of friction polish. And I use an unusual friction polish. This is Doctor's Pens Plus finish, which is one that he uses for fancy pens. Well, I have found out, I was experimenting with it, and I have found out it works wonderful as a finish on these little birdhouses. It has a little bit higher percentage of solids in it than does the standard. It goes on easy and quick. You could probably get away without even overspraying it at the end, but I like to overspray it with lacquer. It gives it just an extra little gloss that I like. So I'm sure you can't see that on the camera, but it makes a nice little finish on that. So what we're going to do is we're going to finish that off, take that off. That's where you need a good sharp spindle gouge. Just work it down there a little bit at a time until you get a very, very little end. And it should just come right off. This is a Thompson spindle gouge. I love Thompson tools. I have both a Sorby and a Thompson, and they're pretty close to being equal. Have a little bitty, very thin, and I'll just cut that at the end so that it comes off without breaking the fibers and pulling out. Turns out pretty good. What we'll do is we'll hit that with the 220 probably. And the 320. And we'll go back and add a touch of a little drop or two of the sanding sealer. We'll add a little drop or two of the Doctor's Pins Plus finish. So there we have pretty much our base right there, the bottom. I do one thing to it in additional, and that is I quickly take a What I like to do is I like to go inside the opening and blacken the inside of that with a Sharpie. And I don't know what the effect is other than the fact that I like it. I like the way it looks. So there it is. Can you see any difference in the character of the opening? It just looks more finished when you have it blackened on the inside. So that is the bottom. We'll put the perch in a little bit, but now we're going to do the top. Okay, go back to that box of cutoffs that you've got, and we're going to we actually have two boxes that we're going to deal with. We're going to use one for the main portion of the top, and then we're going to use another box I'm just going to sit this down for now. This is what we're going to do. This is a top piece out of the box, just a 2-inch square, looks like maybe 3.5 inches long. And I have a whole bunch of scrap. And I like to use contrasting scrap. That's a piece of Padauk. That's a piece of canary wood. That is a piece of maple, and that is a piece of wingy. And I line them up. Good old tight bond 2, squirt on all of them, glue them together. And they're ready to go. Except we're going to skip this drying step and go directly to this one that I glued together yesterday. I like to leave tight bond glued together twice. Another thing I have found that's helpful is I have a bunch of little plywood scrap that I put on the bottom to help compress this, because sometimes you'll find that the little thin pieces have a tendency to warp a little bit. So what you want to do is you just want to put that on the bottom. What we'll do is go make a roof out of that. First thing we'll do is find my center punch. We're going to lay a hole in the center of that. And I just do by eye. Open the jaws a little bit to use those as a jam chuck. Okay, what I want to do here, I'm not going to try to shape it at this point in time. All I'm primarily going to do is cut a tenon on the end of it so that I can reverse it and put it back in the chuck, which holds it a whole lot better than it does in a jam situation. And we can just make this a little bit rounder. Go back to my special parting tool. Screw it up on the end, and then I'm going to cut a tenon. I have a little guide that I make. This is for the Vic Mark 100 for recess and for tenon. I'll just use that for the tenon. See how close that is. Looks like a little big. Yeah, it's a little bit big. Better to keep them a little bit big than a little bit small. Actually, after a while you can cheat because the diameter of the live chuck is almost the same as this. So if it's close to that, it'll work. So now we've got this. And we'll reverse it and put it in the chuck. Okay. And what I'm going to do now You hear that? That's why I put the face mask on. After a while you'll learn. That wing chips awfully bad. A little chipped out here. Let me see if I can clean that up enough to make it usable. Just scrape that a little bit. Oops, got a little bit of chip right there. I like to get those out of there. Okay, what we will do what we want to do is we want to cut a knob on the bottom that will fit right into that hole. A lot of people don't do this, but I find this is a good thing to do. And that should be a 3/4 inch hole. And I think this is set up for 3/4 of an inch. Yeah, pretty close. I like to go ahead and go in and undercut these so that the roof that slopes out over the opening. I just think it looks better. So what we'll do is let's cut that out. It's a whole lot easier to make them smaller than it is to make them bigger. If you cut them at a very slight angle, so that it barely fits in, that doesn't quite fit yet. There we go. What you do is you turn it on and just hold that up there, and that burns the line, and if you cut the line away, then it fits perfectly in there. Works good. Okay. Next thing we do is the other part. Remember, we hollowed out on the inside. Let me take this back off. We hollowed the inside of this to make it light. What we're going to do is we're going to hollow this some too. It's not something that's absolutely necessary, but I like to make them as light as possible. If you take a spindle gouge and turn it up on its side, you can actually use it like a drill. And I can drill that out. Makes a nice hole to remove some of the wood, because I'm going to cut it down more on the outside, and then when I shape it, we're going to then go ahead to sand it. And I normally like to bring this back up again, trying to keep it between centers as much as possible. Not so much for breaking it, but just for stability. Because if it vibrates, you don't get as clean a cut as you do if it's nice and stable. What we'll do is we're going to cut that down. Little chip there. Let me get rid of that little chip. If you pay attention to the detail, a lot of things will work better. It just looks better. You can hear the vibration from that little spindle gouge trying to make it cut something it's not supposed to cut. And let's just take a look, see how that looks. You gonna try the light?
I am.
Okay. I think that'll be satisfactory there. What we'll do is we'll finish shaping this, and then we'll put some finish on this. Sometimes when you're doing these, you'll find that you're cutting up grain instead of down grain. Sometimes you just can't avoid it. So you need a sharp tool and go easy, and you can eliminate some of those tear outs that you would normally be getting. And how you shape the top is just another one of those things. It's the turner's discretion. Okay. Let's see what that looks like. And a lot of this is just by eye. It's just what looks pleasing to your eye. I think that's okay. We'll go ahead and I'll clean this up a little bit, and then we'll put finish on it. Sand it very briefly. You hear the high frequency vibration that you're getting, because it's vibrating all the way up to there. Looks pretty good. Before we get that off, we'll hit it with a sandpaper real quickly. Now, Okay, in this brief interlude that we just experienced, I went ahead and sanded with my vacuum system just to take advantage of it. And if you have a vacuum system in your studio, by all means use them. They are well worth the investment. And I just should have had mine outside rather than inside, to be very honest about it. Okay, that's a little sanding sealer. And we're going to put a little bit of...
Charles, what does a sanding sealer do?
Sanding sealer just makes the finish easier to lay on the surface and doesn't soak in.
Okay.
And you can use, a lot of people use nitrocellulose. Mylan sanding sealer is a very good sanding sealer. I used it for a while, but it was 3 times the cost of what the shellac sanding sealer is that Jimmy Clues talked about. That's the advantage of going to some of the symposiums. You learn a lot of tricks when you talk to these established turners that have done everything in the world like he's done. And he is just hell-bent on using the... If you can use shellac, but it has to be a wax-free shellac. And their seal coat is wax-free, and that's the key. If you put a wax shellac on there, you can't put any top surface on it because it won't stick to it. It doesn't stick to the wax. So, and if you watch many of the videos of a lot of the other turners, what they do is they make a block, and I don't think I've got one handy, that is the same size as this, and they actually reverse chuck it and put this end into a holder on the other end and then cut it off. I haven't found that that's necessary because I'm fairly adept at getting these things cut off. Now watch this one not work with the hoop.
We'll edit it.
Okay. Now we'll get a little sandpaper, clean that up, put a finish on it, and then we'll put a little eye hook. I use the eye hooks. A lot of people have different philosophies on what a lot of people make their own hooks. Okay. Okay. Take an awl, put in the end of that, punch a hole in the end of it, and then put an eye hook in it, and there's the top. And there is, let's find a nice orientation there. There is the bottom. And that is the birdhouse. The only thing we haven't done is what? We haven't made a perch for the bird to sit on. So we'll do that right quick. That's the quickest thing that we do. Now, one of the things that I do is that before this comes off, I clean that up because I'll show you just in a second what I use them for. Okay. This makes now an extremely nice glue block, because these are all purchase. Look familiar? These are purchase that I use. I make purchase from basically 4 different things. I use holly, bobinga, I use ebony, I do some out of hard maple too, but I don't seem to see a hard maple one in here. And you can make them, you can make big ones. That's out of cocobolo. The thing about it is I can make probably 3 perches out of that one. So what I like to do is select a perch that is contrast to this. So I will make a, you want a black perch on this one? Or would you like an ivory? I mean, not an ivory, but a holly perch. I think I'll go with one of these. That's a bobinga. That'll work good. See, is they're all ready to go right there. And all of these have a container over here that I put them in because all of those become glue blocks for some other project. So let's stick that in there right quick. And I don't have any dimensions per se for making the purchase. I do them strictly by eye. And it really doesn't take very long to do one. First thing I do is just round it off. See if that's round yet. Not quite. It's got a flat side on it. We'll make it a little bit smaller. Try to taper down toward the base. I put a separate ring on it, just like that. See if that's round. Nope, it has a flat side on it too. Have to make it a little bit smaller. Okay, that looks good. Round over the end a little bit so you don't see the hole from the live center stuck in it. Some people just use a little stick of birch or a little stick of dowel rod, or some people use bamboo stuck in there. And I just think it adds so much to the character of the birdhouse to have a little bit different appearance. So, take a little of the Doctor's Pens Plus and we'll just put that on there. Okay, the final thing that we have to do before we got everything done is we need to cut that down to 1/8 of an inch, because I'm going to use an 1/8 of an inch drill to drill a hole in the side of that. I'll use a parting tool here. And just cut this down. It looks too big. It is. There we go. And I'll use my little pin. Okay, let me get my drill. Okay, and I'll put the hole right there so that the bird sits a little bit off center from the opening. Well, there we go. Okay, and I use CA glue to put this in and put the top on. And once that's all completed with the eye hook in it, then I take it over and spray it with, I put a single coat, sometimes 2 coats, of rattle can lacquer. I buy it at Ace Hardware. They're clear gloss. And that just gives it a little special thing, and that gives you the finished look of wherever it went. There it is. So that'll be what it'll look like when you get the finish on it. And that one has finish, and you can see there is a slight gloss difference in the two of them. But they seem very popular. People like them. They love the cardinal. I used to make make them with the little birds on them, and some people liked them. A lot of people didn't. But once I started putting the red cardinal on them, you can put 20 up there. All 10 of the red cardinals will be gone before the other ones will be. They just love the red cardinal. So that is my take on how to make a cardinal birdhouse. And I hope that you've benefited somehow from the demo, and I hope you continue to be safe during this unusual time. So wish you well, hope you stay well. And that's it.
All right, Charles, how much does the food bank, how much can we get off of that in order to contribute?
$25.
So that's $25 going back to the food bank during this time. So
Yep.
that's a really great thing that's happening. I've got another question for you, Charles. Your live center here, Can you tell us how you make this piece right here? What do you use to attach that to your tool? I think that's a handy little tip that we have here.
One of the things that I have found that, because I am convinced that turning between centers is the key to stability, is I make a lot of holders for the live center. The threads on the end of that is 3/4 tin. And you can go to my ever friendly Tractor Supply and you can buy 3/4 tin nuts. And they are $1, depending on the week, $1.69 to $1.99 a pound, and typically you get 16 of them. They're about an ounce a piece for a pound. And I take a 1.5 inch Fortner bit and drill a hole in a piece of wood. I have the one, wherever it is, the one that was on the end of the live center. This is one that I made the other day. I made some vases, and I wanted to stabilize the vase, and so I made one the exact size of the entrance to the vase. This one is one that is to be shaped, because when I make them, like when I do the tops, I don't make them one at a time. I make them 5 or 10 at a time, and so I have a whole bunch of these that are ready to go. So if I need a very specific shape, this is another one that I made. This one is one of the, what do you do with that other one? I don't know. Anyway, but this one, if you look very closely, has a, I must have set it down or something. It actually has a hole in the end of it. And what I use this for is if I make a finial, like is on these, if I make something like this, what I will do, if you'll look, that fits right on the end of it. And I use that not to force it to turn, but all I want to do is stabilize that icicle as I'm cutting it. And a lot of times this will not even spin, it'll just rest on there, but it keeps the vibration down. This one probably was like this one at one time, but over time it's got its use. And I have a couple of others around here. There's one. That's a different vase. I made one for a big vase. And it'll just get shaped down and shaped down and shaped down till that. And they're very inexpensive. I mean, you got practically nothing in the nut. You got scrap wood and you got a little bit of epoxy. And I encourage you, if you're going to make them, drill a hole in the epoxy and put it in the epoxy. And then take a, oh, here's the other one. This is my live center. Other live center that's no longer a live center. Actually, it's now a drive center. I put a roofing nail through the live center and then put a piece of banding tape on the top of it. This goes into the headstock, so anytime I want to shape one, I put this on there, bring up something to hold it in place, and then I can shape it to whatever configuration that I want. And they are, I find them, to me, they're very, very useful, very handy, and it really allows you to make a lot cleaner cut than you may think, because it eliminates a lot of the vibration. And when you have something, if you're doing a vase that might be 15 inches or so long, boy, the vibration out on the end of that can be significant. But when you put one of these right in the end of it, it eliminates the vibration. You just get a much cleaner cut. So, but they're 3/4 tin. You can buy them at Tractor Supply, and I have a bag of them. I typically, when I do a demo, this is one of the things I talk about, and I always have a bag full because I'm giving them away. Everybody in the audience, can I have one? Can I have one? And I say, oh yeah, here, have one. But I find them very handy, very useful.
All right, thanks, Charles. We appreciate that. Good tip.